Hello, y'all. K-Dub here, and in this episode of Buddhism 200, we're going to continue the Ask a Buddhist questions, and we're going to focus on the Buddha and teachings. And so I imagine these are going to be quite complex, because the Buddha and teachings get really complex. So let's go ahead and head down here. The Buddha. Do Buddhists worship the Buddha? If you mean like religious rites and rituals, then yes. If you mean like the Buddha is the be all end all of existence, no, not necessarily. I personally revere the Buddha. I have a deep found respect for the Buddha. I take the words of the Buddha that we have preserved uh, very seriously. I respect them very much. I test them very. I scrutinize those very carefully. And what I have internalized are things that I've tested over a long period of time. So if you ask a majority of Buddhists, they would probably answer yes to this question. And I would say yes as well, because there is devotional chanting where the Buddha is involved. Excuse me. When I think about the Buddhas going forth, I think about how difficult it must have been to make that choice. Because when Siddhartha Gautama decided to leave the palace life, it was after the birth of his child Rahula, which means fetter, by the way. And fetters are sort of like vines, right? So it must have been very difficult to leave his wife and child to try and find the middle way. That's what I sort of think about with the going forth. I also think, sometimes I'm like, wow, what a fool, had everything, and then decided to go find this middle way thing instead of enjoying the wealth and prestige and all that. But, at the same time, I'm a fool, so what do I know? When I think about the Buddha, I think about the qualities of the Buddha. There's a chant about the qualities of the Buddha that the Buddha is fully awakened being, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. Those I think about those qualities, not about the physical form of a Buddha, because that means nothing. Physical form changes over time, but those qualities of the Buddha are more stable. And what I will even argue that it's situational, um, where the Buddha may have practiced more compassion in one situation than the other situation, because that was what was warranted. But once again, that's something that's taken upon faith and belief, because I wasn't there when the texts were written down. I wasn't there when the Buddha became the Buddha. So that's taken upon belief and faith. Are you enlightened? If not, how do you know? How would you know if you were? So no, I am not enlightened. I still have a lot of attachments. If I were working toward enlightenment, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I have $48,000 of student loan debt, so I want to pay that off and be free and clear of that before pursuing that enlightenment thing. And there are still things that I want to do um, in a layperson's life before really putting all my energy toward that. If not, how do you know? Still a lot of attachments. How would you know if you were? That wouldn't be there. It would be a feeling. It's sometimes described as a feeling of freedom that is enduring, a feeling of happiness that is enduring. It isn't affected by outside circumstances at all. And that's very difficult to process, right? Because we think, yeah, sometimes we're all happy and well, and then something happens that is we don't perceive very well, and we're not happy anymore. We might be angry, we might be jealous, we might be very pissed off. So that's very difficult to process. Do you know anyone who is enlightened? If not, how do you know the Buddha's teachings are true? I apologize, but that second question is about as ridiculous as it gets. Do you know anyone who is enlightened? Not to my knowledge. I don't know of anyone whose happiness is not tied to their outside environment. Uh, so maybe I'm just in the wrong circle of friends and all that, but I do not know anyone who's enlightened. If not, how do you know the Buddha's teachings are true? How do you know any religious teachings are true? You don't. It's belief and faith. Once it's like direct knowledge, my question becomes: is that even religion anymore? Or is that just like philosophical fact or something? Um, and I don't need to know that it's true in order to follow the Buddha's path because I have the faith. that the teachings do lead to that liberation, to that freedom. What is nirvana? The complete extinction of dukkha is what is nirvana. It is not a place, it is not a state of mind, it is the complete extinction of dukkha. It's said to be extinguished. Just like a fire gets extinguished, it no longer burns, right? And sometimes it's nirvana has been described as an element, sort of like the water element or the fire element. But for the most part, nirvana is just indescribable because it's everything that we can perceive is conditioned. Nirvana is unconditioned, so it's very difficult to perceive and interpret that. So yeah, that's nirvana is the complete extinction of dukkha. Buddhist teachings. Buddhists believe that suffering is caused by craving. If someone had cancer, would you say it was caused by their craving? No, I wouldn't. Cancer has genetic, environmental causes. So I would look at those things as opposed to the person's craving. Uh, their craving could cause more dukkha because they want to be free of the cancer, but may not be able to be free of the cancer if it's terminal. That could cause dukkha for sure. Um, so in that situation, I would say, yeah, your craving is causing you more dukkha right now. This is just something that has to be accepted, contemplated, and then we have to find a way to sort of make the best of the situation, if at all possible. But I would not say the cancer is caused by their craving. You could make an overall argument that it is because there's craving. That person was reborn, and because they were reborn, they got cancer at some point. But uh, I'm not really sure about that particular argument, but it's possible. So, but I wouldn't say it personally. Buddhism goes on about suffering. Don't you find it pessimistic and depressing? No, I don't. That's actually one of the things that drew me to Buddhism was this sort of realistic point of view of this material world. Think about it. Everything that is born, that is created, it ages, right? At some point, it becomes ill. Like a car breaks down. Could be like an illness, and then death. It stops. The car stops working. A person passes away. And so that realism is what sort of drew me to Buddhism. It's like, yeah, in the here and now, these things are happening right under my nose, and it's causing this sort of dukkha to occur because there's craving for these things. Why are we doing that? Let's stop doing that, or at least try and reduce it. So I don't find it pessimistic and depressing. I find it very refreshing, actually. If craving leads to suffering, isn't it wrong to want to reach enlightenment? Well, how can you reach enlightenment if you don't have a desire to reach enlightenment? What's the motivation there? Are we just trying to reach enlightenment for the sake of reaching enlightenment? The Venerable Ananda was asked a similar question in a sutta. I don't remember which one. There are thousands of them. And a Brahmin asked a very similar question. And the Venerable Ananda says, "Do you know this park? It's a really beautiful park, right? Um, and you have a desire to go there, but you get there. You get to that park, and you're enjoying that sort of beauty and everything. Do you still have that craving to go there? No, because you're there, right? It's the same thing, sort of, with enlightenment. It's that beautiful park simile. We're gonna make it a simile. It's that beautiful park, right? And we want to get to that beautiful park. And then when we get there, that desire isn't there anymore. And once you reach enlightenment, there's no craving at all for those particular things. And so it's basically the raft gets put to the side because we've already crossed a river type situation. And we sort of just go about our way. What do Buddhists mean when they say we have no self? So no self can be interpreted different ways. It can be no self, no soul, egolessness, blah, 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 based upon context. But generally, what this means is that there is no permanent entity called self that goes from lifetime to lifetime, uh, that experiences the results of dukkha um, or karma, sorry. Um, that ultimately, those are just processes. And But then, someone's like, well, then I guess murder isn't a thing. But it is, because there's legal definitions for that. And even within Buddhism itself, it would say that is destroying a living being, because that living being has consciousness and breath. So yes, murder is a thing. But ultimately, there is no self, as in there's no permanent entity that is unchanging, that we call ourselves. Now, we do have 5 sort of definitions of what constitutes a self, what we commonly think of as ourself. Form, feelings, perceptions, our intentional actions, and consciousness. Now, those we commonly think of as self, but they're not really ourselves, because they're all processes. That's the basic argument of no self. When the Buddha was asked directly if there was a self or not, said no, because the person would not have understood that. Of course, that's the argument of those interpreting the text, though. So take that with a grain of salt. But if you say there's a self, you can cling to a self. If you say there's no self, then you can cling to what's it called? Oh goodness. Anyway, that there's annihilationism. That's what it's called. So what basically the middle ground is, there's no permanent self. There is a conventional self. Without it, there's no language to use that where people understand. This being's arm hurts. No one's gonna know what you mean. But if you say my arm hurts, then people are like, oh, that's understandable. So we use that as a conventional sort of language. But at the ultimate level, there is no self. It's just matter, mental formations, and consciousness, according to the Abhidhamma. Do you believe in rebirth? If so, what animal do you think you will come back as? If not, why bother living by the Buddha's teaching? So, first question, do you believe in rebirth? Yes, I think it is a very highly probable process. Whether it works the way that it's described in uh, the Buddhist texts, don't really know. If so, what animal do you think you will come back as? If I come back as an animal, and it's not even me that comes back, honestly, remember, there is no self. But conventionally speaking, if I came back as an animal, I would commit ritual suicide on that one, because being an animal is not a piece of cake. People think, oh man, I'd love to be a lion so that I can sleep, but you also have to go hunt for your own food. Um, uh, you have sort of some of these rituals, even with lions. Like if there's a threat to the king of the pack there, then the that king is gonna eat their children or whatever. I don't remember exactly what that practice is, and it's terrifying as a human being, but as a lion, it's like no big deal. That's how life works. I don't want to come back as an animal. I would love to come back as a human being, again. Because I was late to getting on this path to the middle way. Maybe in the next existence, that being would be able to progress further on that path. If I don't believe in rebirth, why bother living by the Buddhist teaching? Let's say I didn't believe in rebirth at all. There are still teachings of the Buddha that are empirically testable. For example, practicing the 5 precepts and observing the behavior of others around you is something that you can do, and it's something you can internalize. So there are teachings that are visible in here and now. Is sort of the statement. What do Buddhists believe happens after death? So that's a very good question, and it differs based upon the religious tradition within Buddhism. So in Theravada, there's a continuous process. It's an instant process where there's a stream of consciousness that goes from one life to the next, called the relinking consciousness. So the death consciousness activates this stream, goes into the stream, that goes into the next existence, and then life continuum consciousness kicks in. Relinking consciousness is basically turned off, and so the life continuum consciousness keeps the lifespan going, and there will be other consciousness that is added as organs are developed, for example. For some traditions, I believe for my friend Chris's tradition, which is more of a Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, which is basically an umbrella term, um, there's this intermediary stage. I think it's called the bardo, And in the bardo, one sort of encounters those inner demons. Whether to take that literally or whether it's metaphorical is up for interpretation. And one is in this intermediary stage until they've conquered those demons, and then that consciousness goes to the next life. So it can be different based upon the religious tradition, of course. And in Pure Land Buddhism, I don't even know how that works. In Pure Land Buddhism, because Pure Land Buddhism is very different from many other sort of traditions. Is Buddhism one or many? What, if anything, unites different traditions? Buddhism is many. There's Theravada, which is the more traditional schools. And then you have the Mahayana schools. So Zen is a Mahayana school. Japanese Buddhism would be a Mahayana school and is more of a cultural school. And then you have the Vajrayana Tibetan traditions. So many. Buddhism is many. What, if anything, unites different traditions? Dukkha! So suffering and unsatisfactoriness. And that is the primary issue in all branches of Buddhism, to my knowledge, in addressing that main concern, because that is the thing that keeps us going round and round in the cycle. What is karma? It's intentional action, according to the Theravada text. So intentional actions of body, speech, and mind. Wholesome and unwholesome, indeterminate and defunct. There are different types of karma based upon, at that point in time when that action is taken, what is the intention, what types of consciousness and mental factors are going on at that time. So it's a very complex sort of process, and that's why in one particular text in Theravada school, it says, don't even try to think about every way that karma can play out. You'll go cuckoo bananas and you won't be any closer to eliminating your dukkha. Is having a disability the result of our previous karma? It could, but I would put that more as an environmental and genetic sort of situation, or circumstantial. I mean, I could fall down the stairs and uh, crush my leg and I won't be able to walk again. That's a disability. Is that based upon a karmic force? It could, but there's no way for me to know that for sure. Could it have been an environmental thing? Absolutely. Falling downstairs would be definitely an environmental thing. So it could be, if we view karma sort of as a predisposition to disability, but I would put that more as genetic and environmental factors, to be honest. So that answers all the questions. So I hope this was insightful. Uh, you may agree or disagree with the answers that I gave, and that's perfectly fine. You can leave a comment if you want. How would you have answered some of these questions? So in the next episode, we're going to address the LGBTQ plus sort of issues, and we're going to look at 3 different sort of viewpoints when it comes to those issues using a Buddhist lens. So it's going to be more of a secular view. It's going to be more of a wow, how would I explain this? There's going to be more of a secular view, and that's going to probably dominate the first third. Then there's going to be sort of a more traditional view that, if you put it on a spectrum, is a little bit leaning more progressive. And then there's going to be a viewpoint based upon multiple sources. So multiple Buddhist sources and polling sources as well. So until the next episode, everyone take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye for now.